There is this movie, it's from 2017, Beauty and the Beast, which is a sort of remake with real actors of the animation movie. I was looking at those publicity photographs. When you look at the style of the movie, it reminds me a bit of 18th or 19th century Central Europe, or sort of glamour Hollywood version of that, sort of fairy tale version. Here we see Kevin Kline as the father of Emma Watson in the movie, and he builds automatons with very imaginative themes. These are movie props, of course, but to give you an example of a real automaton, this Lion Automaton was made around 1640, and you can see the clockwork-like mechanics below the lion and the clock. The wings of the lion will have moved. The automatons that the father is working on have beautiful exotic themes. I want to take a closer look at them now. We see, for example, a sleigh, and it reminds me of King Ludwig of Bavaria, the Dream King, or he was a Swan King. He was called that way. You can even see a swan in the design of the sleigh. And he lived from 1845 till 1886. And it was known that he made sleigh rides at night. Here we have an illustration from Harper's Bazaar. And we see horses, we see the king in his sleigh, and it's all very fairy tale like. And this Swan King, Dream King, he commissioned the construction of this Neuschwanstein castle. When I was younger, I visited that castle once, and it was interesting to see it. I don't really remember much of it. For some reason, I remember the murals more than, what is most impressive of this photograph. But the castle looks like a fairy tale castle, and when Walt Disney visited Europe, he was impressed. And when you look at the Disney park castles, they are inspired by this one, this Neuschwanstein castle. And when you look at the castle of the Beast in the Beauty of the Beast Disney movie from 2017, it looks like it is inspired by this castle as well. So it's very appropriate that there is some sort of subtle reference to this Dream King, Ludwig II of Bavaria. And when we look further, there is a rhinoceros, very beautifully made. And I guess that's this Hollywood production, I guess these were made by contemporary, present day goldsmith or someone who knows how to make these things very well, because they look very beautiful. I would like to have them. But this figure of the rhinoceros reminds me of the woodcut of a rhinoceros by Albrecht Dürer from 1515. And it seems to be the main inspiration of this piece. A few decorative details seem to have been added, like those blue things that I see. But when I look at those stripes on its belly, I don't know if I say it right, but there are these typical stripes, like a sort of rib cage or something. I'm not a biologist, but it looks like that. They are in a certain typical manner, which reminds me of the Dürer rhinoceros. I mean, I've looked at photos of actual rhinoceros animals in nature, and they have similar lines there on their bellies, but they are not. I mean, Dürer stylized these into a certain form, and that form has been copied more or less, or has inspired this the maker of this piece for the movie, I think. There's an elephant who is carrying the Taj Mahal, And in another video that I make of the Moulin Rouge, the elephant at the Moulin Rouge, you can see that there was an elephant with a little building on it. So there were elephants designed in the 19th century with little buildings on it. But it also reminded me of this painting, The Temptation of Saint Anthony of Salvador Dali. And we see elephants with buildings walking there. And it's a bit difficult to determine whether this has exactly been the inspiration for this piece, but I can imagine that the person who made this piece for the movie has looked at Salvador Dali's work for inspiration. On the right under we see a piece which resembles the Rialto Bridge in Venice and a gondoletta with two people on it, very romantically. And paintings of Venice by Canaletto were sold to English tourists, and they spread around Europe, so the image of Venice was known around Europe in earlier times. I can imagine that if you lived in the 18th century or the 19th century, that Venice was such a place that you wanted to visit, that you dreamed of. Or maybe once in your life or so you go to Italy. Nowadays it's easier to travel. For example, when you're in Europe, you can go there, but quite easily now, quite cheaply if you take a certain airline. But here we see a photo of Venice that I made myself in 2009. The Canal Grande, I think it was, but I think those gondolettas make a dreamy image. The giraffe is most clearly unfinished, but it's most clearly also an automaton. You can see the mechanics. Being Dutch myself, I like the windmill that the father is working on. I cannot really put it into some sort of context further, but I like the little reference to the Netherlands. Let's just make it a little reference to my country. I really like these very imaginative motifs. It's very fitting for a sort of fairy tale version of 18th or 19th century Europe. These are the things that were exotic in those days. You could have heard of Venice, you could have seen perhaps an elephant or a giraffe, or you could have seen drawings of them. And it is of course a 21st century Hollywood fantasy, but it's very beautifully done, and I really like the artwork of The Beauty and the Beast, the 2017 version.